We are now live.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Before we begin to consider tonight's business, can I please take this opportunity to remind you all to keep your devices on mute unless you're speaking. Please indicate that you wish to speak by adding a comment in the chat function or raising your hand in WebEx, or if you're dialing in, which I don't think anyone is actually, please state your name. The meeting facilitator will then advise me that you wish to speak. Thank you. Can I also make the usual request to everyone to ensure that your mobile phones are switched off or on silent? So before we begin the meeting, I ask that we observe a minute's silence in respect of former councillor and honorary alderman Ian Clifton, who served the people of Risley for over 20 years and sadly passed away on the 12th of November 2020. Thank you. So moving on, I've received an apology for lateness from Councillor Jackson for tonight's meeting. Are there any other apologies, please?
I think Councillor McHugh is having difficulty getting in. Will join us shortly.
Okay, thank you. Okay, no other apologies. Thank you. So on that, if you lose connection during the meeting or have any difficulties with your equipment, please can you contact the meeting facilitator, that's if you're here now, if you're not, then by indicating in the chat function or phoning the number that was provided. Can I also ask that if you need to leave the meeting early, that you advise me that you're doing so that we know who's actually gone. Thank you. So moving on to questions from members of the public. I'd like to take this opportunity to remind everyone that we can only accept questions from members of the public that have been received by the deadline of 6 p.m. this evening, and there have been no such questions. So that concludes agenda item 1, and we move on to agenda item 2. This is petitions to be presented by members of the public. I understand that there are no new petitions to be presented by members of the public. Therefore, we'll move on to agenda item 3. Agenda item 3 is minutes of the last meeting. Does the council approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of October this year as a correct record and authorise me to sign them?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Lots of nods.
Agreed.
Thanks very much. So now moving on to agenda item 4, which is the disclosure of local and/or disclosable pecuniary interests. As I know members appreciate, it's important that we observe the provisions in the Code of Conduct relating to the disclosure of interests. So can I ask members to disclose the existence and nature of any local and/or disclosable pecuniary interests in tonight's business? I've got a few hands up here now. Councillor Meader.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to declare an interest on item 5. My wife works for the Bedfordshire Fire and Rescue Authority. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Meader. Councillor Crofts.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to declare also an interest in item number 5.
That's a start. Now,
the GIF Fire and Rescue Service.
Oh, we've got somebody not on mute.
Okay.
Sorry, I don't know who that was.
Councillor Towler, I believe.
Councillor Towler, would you please put yourself on mute?
Also, Councillor Gambold, who can't get his video.
I was on mute.
It's my.
It wasn't me.
Okay.
Madam Speaker, it's Councillor Meader. If I can just come back, I don't know whether I said item 5 or item 9, but if I said item 5, I meant item 9.
Okay, Councillor Meader, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Headley.
Yeah, this is on item 12.1 of a local interest regarding Peter Street car park as a trustee of the House of Industry.
Okay, Thank you. I can't see any more hands up. Is that everyone? Okay. Oh, sorry, Councillor Atkins, I've just seen your hand.
Yes, I'm a trustee of the House of Industry too.
No, don't do anything down there. Okay, all right, try that.
Okay, somebody is still not on mute. Can't see who that.
Yeah, I'm also a trustee.
As I am.
Thank you, Councillor Moon.
Councillor Tim Hill. I think whenever there's an item on House of Industry, we ought to just do a block declaration.
Okay. Alison is nodding her head, so that's it. It's a block declaration there. Thank you for that. Thank you, Councillor Hill. Anybody else? No more hands? Okay, thank you. And we'll move now to agenda item number 5, which is speakers' communications. As you'll note, there have only been a limited number of civic events since the last council meeting, and these are recorded on the agenda for information. As members of the council will know, this is councillor, making you a councillor now, Colin. This is Colin Foster's last day as Director of Children's Services before he starts a new role in Northamptonshire. So on behalf of the council, I'd like to thank him for his fantastic contribution to children's services during his time as an officer at the borough. It's been my privilege to have worked with him throughout this time, and I don't think I've ever come across a more energetic or inspiring leader. He's been an absolute brilliant advocate for all our children and families. Northamptonshire are very lucky to have you, Colin, and we'll miss you. So thank you to Colin. With regard to this evening's agenda, I'd like to bring your attention to the fact that there is no business to conduct in relation to items 10, 14 and 15, these being questions of the Bedfordshire Fire and Rescue Authority, membership of committees and items brought forward under Procedure Rule FC 26. So now we'll move forward to agenda item 6, which is petitions presented by borough councillors. I understand that there are no new petitions to be presented by borough councillors, therefore we'll move on to agenda item 7. Crikey, we might be finished a bit before 10:30 this week if we carry on like this, let's hope, cross fingers. So, debate on petitions previously submitted. As members will know, under the council's petition scheme, petitions with more than 30 signatures are subject to debate at full council. And tonight we have 2 petitions to be debated. The petition organiser or their representative has up to 5 minutes to introduce their petition, and members will then have the opportunity to ask any questions that they have of the petition organiser before debating the subject matter and deciding whether to make any recommendation. So can I now ask Mr. Mukesh Hira to introduce a petition requesting the council to provide parking permits for food delivery drivers, noting that 5 minutes is the maximum time available for the introduction, please, Mr. Hira. So would you like to start? Can't see you at the moment, but hopefully you'll put your camera on. Mr. Hira? Are you there?
Oh, Mr. Hira, you're on mute. You'll have to unmute yourself.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you. Oh,
Hello,
yeah,
can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Hira.
Okay.
Please carry on.
Yeah. Oh. Okay. The reason for my petition is I'm a courier myself, and so are my colleagues. As you know, as times are changing, food delivery is becoming more and more busier, and it's going to be expanding in the future as well with our local restaurants and obviously our customers and the community in Bedford surrounding. The problems we have at the moment with existing is that we don't have enough parking. What we're finding is always when we're going to restaurants is we've got lack of space to park our vehicles to go into the restaurants to pick up the food for customers. Especially if we're on peak times, for example, breakfast run, lunchtime and dinner time, and obviously mostly weekends. Saturdays is mostly busy all days, and Sunday and Friday evenings. I've seen you have added extra bays for the click and collect, which was on the government on the website, which is for the click and collect and also for us to use. We appreciate that and thank you for adding them bays. But what we're finding is at the moment in St. Lloyd Street, which were the extra 2 bays added, is we're getting still, like probably the public don't know, but we're still getting public parking in the loading bays with the disabled badges. So when we turn up to park, we haven't got nowhere to park because obviously someone else is parking that place. Also, the other thing I would like to mention is our main pickup point is majority of the time is McDonald's High Street, St. Paul's Square, which is a very busy area, obviously with the market on Wednesdays and Saturdays. So parking, it can be a bit of a nightmare. So what we're asking is obviously if we can have maybe more bays put in, for example, instead of what's being offered at the moment, if that's possible, please, because that would help a lot. And also the existing loading bays at the moment, we would, can everyone see me? Is that...
No, you've gone, your video is off at the moment.
Oh, okay.
We can hear you, so keep going.
Okay. Well, at the moment, the existing time for loading bay starts from 9:30 a.m. till the end of the day. We start work from 7 a.m. in the morning, so we'll be using the loading bay from 7 a.m. We're being issued tickets parking in the loading bay when we're going to pick up food. So I would appreciate if the time could be changed in the future to 6 o'clock in the morning, because I've spoken to the franchisee owner of McDonald's on High Street. His name is Adrian Maridas. I've forwarded a letter to Mr. Charles, Councillor Mr. Charles.
Yep.
He should have the letter, which is written by the McDonald's franchisee owner. I mean, obviously I've only got 5 minutes, so I won't be able to read it. That will waste most of the 5 minutes I've got. But if you could look at that letter for me, please, if it's possible. Also, the other permission I would like from yourselves is, at all the councils, is permission to use the loading bays on the high street, please. I know at the moment we've been told that we're not allowed to use them because they're for vans, and but we have a lot of restaurants that do not provide parking. It's just an open front shop where we pick up. There's quite a lot of restaurants that are on the high street where we can easily park on the loading bay to pick up customers' foods. At the moment, we're not allowed to park there, and if someone does park there, goes into a restaurant, we come out, we're being issued a ticket. So I would like that to be taken into consideration, please, as well. I mean,
your time is, sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Hero, your time 5 minutes is up now. Could you just sum up quickly? Oh, there's my time going off, sorry. If you'd just like to sum up, and then we'll ask some questions, and
sorry,
for Royden, we'll come back to you. Is that okay? Are you happy to finish there?
Sorry, just one last thing, if I can say.
Yeah,
I just wanted to say one last thing, if that's possible, please.
Yeah, quickly, please, then.
I would like to say, if, with the council permission, if we can grant us a parking permit, and we're willing to pay a yearly fee, if that could be taken into consideration with a badge at all to put on our cars.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Hero. Sorry for interrupting you. So Councillor Royden is going to respond, but do we have any questions from members first before I call Councillor Royden to respond? No, shakes of head and no hands up. Councillor Royden, would you like to respond?
Well, thank you, Speaker. Yes, as a council, we are very responsive to the needs of businesses, and I think it's important that we are. And I'm grateful to Mr. Hira for appreciating the bays which have already been put in for additional loading around the town centre. And we'll continue to listen to businesses and their needs and do whatever we can to address particular issues as they come along. And whilst we always welcome petitions, and that's why the mayor introduced them, and the ability for people to come and ask questions at council, businesses can contact us any time and speak to myself or highways officers, and we'll always do what we can to accommodate different needs. So don't wait to come to council. Ring me anytime, ring officers. We're happy to speak to you. I think some of the things you've said illustrate that there's been some misunderstandings. I think, Mr. Hira, I mean, for example, the desire to do loading at 7 a.m. in St. Paul's. You can already do loading at 7 a.m. in St. Paul's Square. You can, and the letter from the McDonald's franchise owner said that he wanted to start at 6 o'clock. You can start at 6 o'clock. You can do your loading at 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock. You can do it all the way up to 8 o'clock. There's a short break between 8 and 9:30 when there's peak traffic, when the loading is suspended. But after that, you can go all the way through to midnight. It's not a problem. So I think that it's quite important that we get officers out there to make sure that the drivers know what's going on, and food delivery businesses should benefit from the can-do approach that we have to parking, with free parking opportunities and being responsive to the needs of all the businesses, including taxi drivers, people who use the markets, and everybody else who works around St. Paul's Square. And that includes, when necessary, for loading on WLR lines. You know, unless there are specific no loading prohibitions in place, you can park on WLR lines for loading. That is permissible. It doesn't allow for drivers to park for extended periods on WLR lines and wait for orders, which some are doing at the moment. But you can, like taxi drivers, do your stop and pick up. And you know, WLR lines are there for a reason, that they keep people safe. And in some places, parking is prohibited simply because it's dangerous. And some times are more dangerous than others, which is why we have that busy peak time that's prevented from loading on St. Paul's Square between 8 and 9:30. But up to 8 o'clock, from 6 o'clock, that's fine. And it's important for us, because if the town comes to a standstill with traffic jams and congestion, then nobody's able to do any business. So we've got to be able to keep traffic moving and keep it moving safely. Now, there have been instances recently where food delivery drivers have parked dangerously, and I've been out in St. Paul's Square myself to see what the situation is, and I have witnessed vehicles parked across pavements on junctions in St. Paul's Square by delivery drivers picking up fast food. Now, in those cases, our enforcement officers will take action. They're expected to. It'd be a dereliction of duty if they didn't. Because nobody has a right just to abandon their vehicle to the danger of other road users. So I just put that down as a marker. Food delivery business is something which has grown exponentially during the course of the COVID pandemic. And we've got to recognise that there are other businesses which need loading and unloading facilities. We've got to treat all road users fairly. So I'm very happy to arrange meetings with food delivery businesses and officers. Councillor Van has been very responsive to businesses in the town centre. It was his initiative that got the loading bays put in place just very recently. So I'm going to propose a motion that I, as portfolio holder for Transport, Highways and Environment, together with highways officers, continue to be responsive to these businesses and the loading requirements, whilst recognise the importance of road safety, and that we specifically arrange to meet with you, Mr. Hira, to make sure that you're fully aware of what is available to you and any ways in which we can accommodate you further, lawfully, of course. Thank you, Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Councillor Royden. Is that a motion that you're?
Yes, it is, please.
Do I have a seconder for that?
I'll second it. Councillor Rigby, I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Rigby.
Thank you, Councillor Rigby.
Councillor Foley, I have your hand up raised. Would you have a question or comment on the motion or what's been said?
I have a comment on the petition.
Okay.
One, I think it's very important for us to support the independent restaurants and cafes of Bedford. I think it needs to be recognised that there is a big difference between delivery drivers and taxi drivers, and that the analogy being drawn by the petition is a false one. It seems to me very unlikely that any of the delivery drivers has mobility difficulties that make it difficult for them to walk between a parking place and the restaurant cafe, whereas taxi drivers do need to drop and pick up disabled people and therefore need close access in a way that delivery drivers don't. And if the delivery drivers have their vehicles in those spaces, it makes it much more difficult for the taxis to use those spaces at the same time. And we need to recognise that the sit-in trade is much more valuable to restaurants and cafes than the deliveries ordered through the big apps. And so I think it's appropriate for the council to prioritise those that are in greater need and those that bring more benefit to the restaurants over the delivery drivers. While I wouldn't wish there to be no way for the delivery drivers to go about their business, I'm also reminded that we have a number of those making deliveries of food in Bedford who do so by bike, who therefore don't encounter these same difficulties with the parking restrictions.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Foley. We have a proposal from Councillor Royden. Would you just like to just repeat the end of what you said, and we'll vote on that. You're on mute, Councillor Royden. Stop phrasing.
I'm trying to be a good boy and make sure I mute myself after I speak. Yeah, my apologies, Speaker. Yes, I propose that the portfolio holder for Transport, Highways and Environment and Highways officers continue to be responsive to all businesses' loading requirements, whilst recognising the importance of road safety, and that we meet specifically with Mr. Hira to discuss their needs and respond in any way that we can appropriately.
Okay, thank you. So that has been seconded. I understand we don't have a poll on this particular motion. So would everybody just like to nod in that they agree with that, or shake their head, or
Agreed.
nodding? Yeah, agreed. Mr. Hira, I'm sorry, you had your hand up, but you don't, unless you're asked a question, we can't ask you to speak again. I'm sorry about that, but Councillor Royden, I'm sure, will be in touch with you. So thank you for your petition. Okay, so that is carried. I'm moving on now. Can I now invite Mr. Leon Starzak to introduce a petition requesting the council to conduct an inquiry into why the Mayor and Bedford Borough Council are actively working against the legitimate environmental, health and safety concerns of Wixham residents and not complying with the council's statement of community involvement. Again, Mr. Starzak, if you'd note that 5 minutes is the maximum time allowed for your introduction, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My name is Leon Stashak from the Wixham's Community Group. The authors of this petition have asked me to speak on their behalf this evening. The Statement of Community Involvement specifies how the borough will engage with the community in the development of planning policy and consult with them on planning applications. I think the sentence which best describes the intention of the document is from the Mayor's foreword, where he says, "Community engagement lies at the very heart of all planning activities, and Bedford Borough Council takes consultation with those who live, work and visit the borough very seriously." This document also sets out how the borough will ensure developers conform to the Localism Act 2011. This legislation states that developers are required to consult with communities before submitting planning applications for certain developments. Essentially, this is for large-scale commercial applications of floor space. The Statement of Community Involvement goes even further and states that the borough will encourage applicants to consult with the community for certain developments, even if not required. So what does good involvement with the community look like? I have two examples. Firstly, it's a development called Wixham Park in Central Beds, which is planned for the south of the main Wixham's development. The developers put together a comprehensive website inviting comment from the public, and they also carried out a leaflet drop across Wixham's and neighbouring villages. The second example is from L&Q Estates, who have an application for a G Park near Coventry with around 50,000 square metres of floor space, like G Park Wixham's, and for some homes. Despite the road leading to the units not actually running near residential areas, the planning authority mandated the developers create a website and carry out a leaflet drop over a wide area. In both these examples, every single household was directly informed of the plans and had a simple method of finding out and commenting on what was being proposed. So what do we get in Wixham's? Not a lot is the short answer. I just want to share a map with you. Can't seem to find the button, sorry. For these 4 developments, all over 10,000 metres squared of floor space, there were no websites set up, and nor were there leaflet drops carried out by the developers at all. This is concerning because it's not even Bedford Borough Council that have to create the websites and leaflets. They simply need to ask the developers to do this, but this did not happen. Notification letters from the planning department were sent to a minimum of residences, and some people who have been or will be impacted by these sites were not directly informed. For the 2 largest developments, no letters were sent at all. No consideration seems to have been given for the sheer scale of these units or where the traffic will be routed when deciding who to send letters to. And for the G Park outline application last year, residents we have spoken to who were on the notification list have said they do not remember receiving this letter. Some are adamant they did not get it. Unfortunately, this lack of consultation has led to commercial developments being approved, which have had significant impacts on the Wixham's community. Since the opening of the B&M distribution centre, there have been a major increase in traffic here. Residents have complained that their lives and sleep have been disrupted by the steady flow of traffic 24 hours a day. There are concerns about air pollution and pedestrian safety, particularly with the Wixham's retirement village and planned dementia care home nearby. And we have another 12 warehouses yet to open, all of which will use the same roads. Another concern is with the plans for the whole Wixham's development. The planning department have recently published the design code for Village 3, which includes details of the Wixham's town centre. There are apparently no plans at all to engage with the community on this design code to let them know at this stage what facilities will be created or about the changes to the original plans for their town centre. So, have the Wixham's community been adequately involved in the planning process? The north of Wixham's was always planned to be for employment use, but in the main, this was to be office space. Now what's being created represents the largest logistics park in the borough. This is nothing like what was promised to residents when they bought their homes. Our community deserves to have been kept informed when the plans changed, yet the planning department did not ensure the applicants for these developments consulted with the community, nor did they go very far beyond the basic requirements set out in the Town and Country Planning Order to inform or ask residents for their feedback and concerns. It's very clear to the petitioners that this community is not at the heart of Bedford Borough Council's planning activities, as the Mayor stated, nor do they think that their views are even being sought, let alone being taken seriously. I therefore respectfully request on their behalf that this council finds out why. I believe this should include asking residents here if they believe they have been adequately involved, as it's their opinion that matters the most. Thank you for allowing me the time to speak to you this evening, and I shall do my best to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Mr. Starsack, and thank you for including that quickly. So do any members have any questions, first of all, please? I can't see any hands up at the moment. Oh, yeah, Councillor Coombs, sorry. Oh, and then Councillor Murdo. Councillor Coombs.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, I was waving furiously at you and pressing buttons there.
Oh, okay. I can't see waving furiously, only the hands.
I've got a question for Mr. Staszak, and then when we come on to discuss it, I'd like to say a few words as well, if I may, when we do that. Leon, good evening, Leon, and thank you for that. I wonder if you'd just like to tell us what would the ideal outcome be for you and for the residents here at Wixham's? I endorse a lot of what you've said there. I'm as frustrated as you are, but can you just say to the members present exactly what you think would be the ideal solution to this?
I think there are multiple things, if you forgive me. So firstly, as per the petition, I hope that I've demonstrated that the actions of the planning department and the items I identified last week, with the planning committee, show that they have not engaged in a meaningful manner or anywhere near. And what's important is that the residents here have said that they feel like they should have been engaged with. They would have liked to have known that they were going to be these huge warehouses. The B&M unit, for those who don't know, is one of the largest units in the entire country. And it was put into Wixham's and nobody was directly informed. Notices were put up on lampposts as usual, notices in newspapers, and that was it. That's not good enough. Sorry, that's just not good enough, especially for those people who are being impacted by the traffic. So that's the first thing. I think, as we've discussed many times, there needs to be a look into whether there should be a link road created to take this commercial traffic away. I recognise that most of these applications have been fully approved, so they're going to be built, and so residents deserve that they can have a peaceful life that they expected to have when they bought their homes, especially with all of the marketing material that we were shown in the show homes around Wixham's when we bought years back. This is not what was described at all. And the third thing, if you allow me, in terms of the G-Park application, it is very controversial, and I know that there are lots of different opinions with everyone who I've spoken to. I think one of the main concerns is also with a link road there. There were plans for a link road that cut across, basically halfway across that site and connected up to Watson Road. A couple of the businesses out the Wilstead Industrial Park who that link road would serve, they have also said they want that road. They don't want their vehicles to impact residents. But that link road was removed, that's really disappointing. And those people who live nearby are going to be impacted by that traffic. Sorry, very long answer there.
That's okay. No, that's fine. You've answered my question.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McMurdo, you were waving.
Two questions, but just before I do, a lot of what you say resonates with me, being the ward councillor for Sharnbrook. Possibly not on the scale that you refer to in terms of meterage, but same issues. Can I ask that you forward to our clerks the statement that you read out this evening, because there's a lot of content on that. So that's the question. That's the easy one. But I mean, in Sharnbrook, I mean, do the parish council and the ward councillor take any lead on this interface with the planners?
So that's a difficult situation as I see it. The parish council, they receive these applications, they review them, they comment on them. One thing that we've recognised in Wixham's, and it's part of the reason why we set up the group in the first place, is because the vast majority of people who live here are of a younger demographic, in their 20s, 30s, 40s, maybe 50s. And a lot of them, like myself, are first-time buyers. And it seems that a lot of people just don't generally engage with parish councils, or even with Graham, as from what I've seen. So I think that's a big challenge. Yeah, and Graham is probably better off answering that question, if I'm honest.
Okay, I have Councillor Van. Is it a question, Councillor Van?
No, it's a comment.
Okay,
a response.
I'll come to you in a minute
Thank
when
you.
we've finished asking questions. Then. Any more questions before we come to comments? Okay, no, can't see any hands raised. So comments, Councillor Van?
Thank you very much, Councillor Walker, and thank you for presenting today, Leon. It is appreciated. I do understand what you have said this evening. I do understand the sort of the passion with which you spoke and the history of the site. And as you say, and as you recognise, the way full council works and the way planning committee works, you know, these things are going ahead, as it were. If they have planning permission, they have outline planning permission. I thought it would be useful, nonetheless, to cover off a couple of things as I just talk briefly, because I think Councillor McMurdo actually made a very good point in relation to ward councillors and their involvement in the planning process. I certainly make sure that I alert residents to planning applications in my ward that I represent as appropriate, where they're large scale, certainly. And we don't have a parish council in the town, urban seats, but obviously you have a parish council where you are. So thank you for that question. Thank you for that answer, Leon, to that question as well. That was very, very helpful. I think it's worth bearing in mind as well that in terms of individual planning applications, the mayor is somewhat restricted. In fact, in law, it's one of the sort of weird quirks, as it were, that the planning permission bit is done by the planning committee and is entirely independent of that, although I accept your points around officers and the planning process and your sort of larger point there. So with that in mind, I thought it would just be worth, Madam Speaker, I will be very quick with this, I hope. But the first planning application for 31 square metres of B8, that's the sort of type of warehousing, was granted after a 21-day consultation in July 2011. Wilstead and Elstow parish councils were consulted, 40 neighbours and a site notice and a press notice, and that received no objections. A 28-day consultation in February 2016 on a further sort of outline, and that included consultation with Wixham's and Elstow Parish Council, Wixham's Community Group, 40 neighbours, a site notice, press notice. There was one neighbour objection received due to the height of the building, and a comment about the link road, Leon. That goes back to your comment that you made about the sort of initial plans that you mentioned. And then there was a 28-day consultation in May 2019. Wixham's and Elstow parish councils were informed. Wixham's Community Group, 50 neighbours, a site notice and a press notice. No comments were received from Wixham's Community Group. There was direct, proactive consultation. So I would make it clear that we do, in the spirit of us community involvement, I believe we do proactively consult, as we say we do, and we do write to neighbours. We don't write to everybody, it's true, and I take your point about requiring developers to as well, and that's certainly something I will take away and look into. But in terms of the local authority doing that, clearly there are lots of considerations to make when we deal with the number of planning applications that we do deal with, and I'm sure you understand that. Then in December 2019, January 2020, which feels ages ago in the context of COVID and the lockdown, but just at the start of this year, there was a 28-day consultation on some of the reserved matters. That's the whole site, B8, as you say, and Wixham's and Elstow parish councils were consulted. Wixham's Community Group, 55 neighbours, some technical consultees as well, because it's starting to be a specific planning application. A further consultation on July 2020. Again, those consultations, 167 neighbours as well, and the Wixham's Community Group and relevant technical consultees. I'm just the sort of we received more comments at this point. You're right, and I appreciate, Leon, at this point it may be that sort of concerns started to be voiced and raised. The difficulty
no, it's because we engage with the
that's what I was saying.
Parish,
yes,
yeah? My group. Yeah, we did that. Yeah, that's the reason. I also want to highlight.
If it's all right with you, Leon, whilst
Mr. Starzak, please, could you just let Councillor Van finish?
With respect to you, Mr. Starzak, that is the point I was making. It was because of the concerns you raised that is exactly the point I was making. So I wasn't meaning to not imply that if you thought I was not implying that. Sorry. With that sort of context, if you like, as you recognise and as where we are with planning at the moment. The outline planning permission has been in place for at least 9 years. There are reserve matters that have been worked on. There were legitimate concerns and an objection from Environmental Health, which is cited in the original petition, which resulted in one of the units being turned around to meet that concern. and so ultimately, in that context and where we are with planning policy nationally and where we are with planning policy as a local authority, although I will accept that I will take away and ask about the point about leafleting and developers, I'm more than happy to look into that. So thank you for raising that. Clearly, retrospectively, that's not a sort of an option here. But in terms of what you raised this evening and in terms of the petition which focused on the G site, I would like to move that we note your concern and note the development in question that has already been approved at the outline stage, but also note, and this is important in the context of where you're saying in terms of neighbour consultation, individual consultation, that we have a legal obligation to work proactively with applicants and approach decisions on proposed development in a positive and creative way. That's the wording directly from the National Planning Policy Framework, which does bind us. And if we don't follow that, we are at risk of losing appeals and having costs awarded against us, which does happen and does happen to local authorities up and down the country. So that's something which we have to bear in mind. And the Planning Committee, I know, and members of the Planning Committee do bear in mind as they make decisions as well. Notes that a number of amendments have been made to the scheme during the application process under public consultation, and public consultation was undertaken at each stage in accordance with the Council's statement of community involvement, and that this included letters to adjacent residents, Wixham's Parish Council, public notices displayed at the site and in the press, and that the Council has responded to a number of queries from the chair of Wixham's community group during the planning process. Noting as well, because I think this is important in the context of the petition, that the Council's environmental health officer, who is independent of this and offers, feedback, I'm sure you understand, sort of officers and different bits of the council department have to offer their sort of independent assessment, if you like, of any application, that the council's environmental health officer has raised no objection to the latest amendments made to the scheme, and that the powers concerned on this. So in terms of a motion at full council, the powers concerned are delegated to the planning committee. So I think all we can do as a full council meeting this evening is resolve to push for better planning policy nationally and urgent revisions to the government's planning white paper, which would undermine local communities' current ability to be involved in the planning process. What I will also commit to doing is writing to Mr. Sasak, if that's all right, with you, Mr. Sasak, to make sure I respond to the specific concerns and issues you raised in relation to developers and leafleting as a broader question, so that I can respond more fully to that, because in terms of the original petition, it was sort of focused on G Park in that sense, as I understand it's called, and that wider.
No, it wasn't. No, you've spoken a lot about G Park, but it wasn't about.
I have. Okay, well, I'm accepting your point, Mr. Sasak. I would like to respond on that point in writing to see what our options are in relation to consultation. But we do consult at the moment, and we do, as a local authority, have to follow that scheme of community involvement, and we do follow it, and we did follow it in relation to this development. So I will also follow up on the design code, but I would have to ask for more information on that on my part. Okay.
Okay. I've got, before I see if somebody wants to second that, I've got Councillor Coombs, your hand is raised. Do you have a comment?
I do. I do just want to make a couple of quick comments, if I may, Madam Speaker.
Please.
Yeah. First of all, I would like to thank the Wixham's Community Group for what they do at Wixham's and raising these issues. They're very good at picking up things and making people aware of them, and all credit to them for that. I think, Madam Speaker, the petition is a result of a number of planning matters at Wixham's. It isn't just the G Part, and I noticed that Councillor Van focused very much on the G Part, but it is about more than that. I think Wixham's people feel that planning is something that happens to them, rather than a process in which they can actively take part and make their voices heard. And I noticed Councillor Van, when he responded just then, he mentioned about, we've written to this number of people and we've put notices on lampposts and things like that. But I think consultation is about much more than that. It's not about going through the motions. It is actually about listening to what people say and actually taking things on board. So the G Park is just one example of an application. It's wholly inappropriate for the site in question, and it's going to result in a huge number of HGVs going past residents' properties at all hours of the day, and it comes on top of the B&M and Aldi. I think Mr. Stajak showed you the map with the B&M and the Aldi sites, which previously, as part of the Wixham's Northern Expansion Zone, that was meant for housing. That is housing that we have lost. And we now have warehouses there and potentially more with the G Park proposal. And the seemingly endless procession of HGVs through Wixham's really isn't what was initially intended. And it seems that each planning application that happens for a major development takes us further and further away from that original master plan, with large employment units replacing residential dwellings. And it does make life for those living nearby extremely unpleasant. I also think that whenever these applications are received, and it's rushed to push through controversial and unwanted planning applications, the planning department has alienated a huge section of Wixham's residents who feel whatever they say, however they respond, whatever legitimate concerns they have, these are just ignored. And the planning department really does just give the impression that they are going through the motions rather than serving any meaningful process of public engagement. The planning department, in my view, currently isn't fit for purpose. And the Wixham's public, I don't feel, has any confidence in its ability to review planning applications fairly and appropriately. I believe the planning department should use planning policy effectively to oppose controversial and unwanted development that is not wanted, albeit obviously taking on board policy guidance and the national policy framework. And what they should be doing is using planning to help create a sustainable, pleasant and green and thriving community. So I fully understand where the petitioners are coming from. It's a frustration with the planning department that seems intransigent, inflexible and out of touch. And it really seems as though planning gives the impression it sees us, the public, as a nuisance rather than an integral part of the democratic process whose lives will be affected by planning decisions. It really is an attitude, and I hope, Councillor Van, you will take this part on board as well. It is an attitude within the planning department that needs to change. Consultation needs to be meaningful and not just a process that it has gone through. And if we can get anything out of this, I'd like to think that going forward, we can actually have a planning department that works, listens to people, takes their points of view on board, points that are legitimately made and are often very well thought through. I mean, the Mayor and I are copied in on much of the correspondence that's gone to planning, and the points that residents make are very well thought through. They shouldn't be airily dismissed by a planning department that really isn't interested. So I'm concluding there, Madam Speaker, but I hope councillors and Councillor Van will understand where residents are coming from and the frustration and the boiling anger that is clearly very present as a result of much of what is going on in terms of planning here at Wixham's. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Councillor Walker, given I was named, am I allowed to comment briefly?
You are. I've got Councillor McMurdo waving at me as well.
I'm happy to follow Councillor McMurdo.
Okay, Councillor McMurdo, you have already spoken once, so make it brief, please.
I'll make it as brief as I possibly can. Mr. Staszak, you've got my sympathy with a lot of what you say, and I look forward to seeing your statement. A lot of this is actually around the planning policies, and current government seek to actually even make them weaker to protect you and I in our communities. And I don't want to fetter anyone. There's a number of people in the audience tonight that sit on planning, and I don't want to fetter them and them have to disclose any interest and leave the meeting, because that could prolong it. But I think my area of great concern around community involvement is actually heavily reliant on the developers stepping up to the mark. And I think the planning authorities, and I'm not speaking of Bedford, by the way, in this context, but planning authorities need to help us in communities through the pre-planning application process. That is lengthy. And I'm dealing with one right now that's been discussed now for well over 3 years. And the planning applications now come in for outline, and we've got days to respond to it. So I'll certainly be taking away the observations you've made in the south of the borough and incorporating some of that thinking. I do suspect a lot of it is going to default back to planning policy at a national level. and not only impacting Bedford Borough, but you have my sympathy as a community, as a resident, because we have exactly the same, not on the same scale, I grant you, but we have exactly the same in the north of the borough as well. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Van, you were mentioned.
Thank you very much. I did just want to respond very briefly to say that I don't think I said that writing letters was the sole element of consultation. I think I said it was part of a consultation process. I also talked about the role of parish councils and the role of ward councillors, and indeed the role of everything that could be done under the sun to promote consultation. I also did not say that it was a meaningless functionary sort of process, and indicated that changes have been made to the application following the representations of residents. So I think it's worth Councillor Coombs noting that, and I realise I named you, Councillor Coombs, so technically you could come back on me, but hopefully that was all right to say that. The other point I just wish to make is that obviously national planning policy and planning policy framework does bind us, and we really are quite significantly bound by what national planning policy sets out. I remember, that's in the rush to get planning developments done, because if you don't get them done by a certain time, you have that planning power taken out of your hands effectively as a local authority, and it gets a lot worse. I remember, as education portfolio holder, having to fight tooth and nail to get funding from a range of sources to deliver a second primary school for the Wixoms and the secondary school for the Wixoms. And I'm very proud to have taken part in that process and to have pushed for the capital funding for that. But it was an uphill battle against the planning process. And as Councillor McMurdo cites as well, the way planning policy works and operates. I will also happily commit, in addition to what I said, to meet with Mr. Stasak and the community group, probably virtually for the time being, but more than happy to meet to hear about the concerns more broadly and any changes that we think should happen, but more than happy to meet. And with that, I leave that motion moved, and I think somebody needs to second it.
I have Councillor Hill with his hand raised. Are you looking to second the motion, Councillor Hill?
Councillor Van's motion. I'm sure not that many councillors on the council realise that whilst Councillor Coombs is the councillor for the village of Wixoms, I have the privilege to have the residents of the Wixoms retirement village in my ward at the moment. And I have been working with the residents of the retirement village to make sure that their voice is heard on these issues in the right places. I would urge all councillors to take part properly in the planning process to ensure that their residents are heard. You may or may not always agree with what your residents are saying, but they under the consultation process, it's our duty to make sure they're heard, and it's our duty to make sure we play a full part in that. And I think I've done that for the Wixoms Retirement Village, and I would just ask councillors to bear in mind we are working under the national planning policy framework, but I would like to second and save some time. Cheers.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Councillor Weir, you're waving. Is this a comment on the...
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to make a point that everyone understands that everyone's mentioned in the National Policy Planning Framework and the draconian measures that it appears from what all the speakers before me have said, but it also advises and asks planners to think about the social objectives, and it asks them to support strong, vibrant and healthy communities by ensuring that a sufficient number and range of homes can be provided to meet the needs of present and future generations, and by fostering a well-designed and safe built environment with accessible services, open spaces that reflect current and future needs and support communities' health, social and cultural well-being. So I would just advise all councillors, yes, I agree with the speakers before that we should all, as ward councillors, advise our residents, but don't let's hide behind the policy planning framework all the time when something isn't going quite well, because there are paragraphs in there that do support all the things that have been put forward tonight in this petition. Thank you. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you, Councillor Weir. Okay, well, we have a motion before you. Would you like to sum it up very quickly, Councillor Van, again, because I'm sure people.
Only to say Councillor Weir is right, but obviously we have to defend our decisions in court as well, and that's the testing ground on which I base my comments. And we unanimously approved a planning motion last full council, which raised concerns about the National Planning Policy Framework. But I take your comments in good spirit, certainly. So nothing further to add to the motion, and I think it's, well, I read it out, it's there, so.
Okay. So we do have a poll set up, but I'm not sure that it is is for the. I'm just looking to see if it's the poll actually is the right question. Possibly not.
Speaker, the poll is based on the question in the petition.
Okay.
Madam Speaker,
Madam Speaker. Chief Executive, yes, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You have a motion before you presented by Councillor Van and seconded by Councillor Hill. That should be the vote. I would suggest you do not take the automatic poll, given it's the wrong question. If anybody, if there is to be a show of hands, I can do it by just calling out names, not a recorded vote, but I am set up to call out names, if you know. But if everybody's in agreement, then that would obviously be easier. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, so briefly, could Councillor Van please just repeat briefly exactly what it is he proposed? Because it was a few minutes ago.
Yes, no, absolutely, Councillor Coombs. Sorry, I think that's a perfectly reasonable request in that context. It essentially notes the petitioner's concerns. The development in question has been approved at the outline stage. That's in terms of G Park. Although I'm happy to take that sort of, you know, that those a number of applications have been approved at the outline stage.
Sorry, Councillor Van. Can
yes.
you just read the motion and not elaborate it?
Yeah.
If it's possible.
Notes that the council has a legal obligation, as stated in the National Planning Policy Framework, to work proactively with applicants and approach decisions on proposed development in a positive and creative way. Notes that a number of amendments have been made to the scheme during the application process, with public consultation undertaken at each stage in accordance with the council's statement of community involvement. Notes that this has included letters to adjacent residents and Wixham's Parish Council, public notices displayed around the perimeter of the site, and a press notice. Notes that the council has also responded to a number of queries from the chair of Wixham's community group during the planning process. Notes that the council's environmental health officer has raised no objection to the latest amendments to the scheme, and notes that the powers concerned are delegated to the planning committee, and therefore resolves to continue to push for better planning policy nationally and urgent revisions to the government's planning white paper, which would still further undermine local communities' ability to be involved in the process, in the planning process. Separate to that, and that is a motion, but separate to that, I have agreed, obviously, to meet with the residents and to respond with a written response, if that makes sense. But that I don't think needs a motion.
Okay, thank you. So that is the motion that we can't see the motion, Councillor Murdo, because it's a new motion. You've heard it read out now. So I think
Speaker, just a point of order. I wasn't actually asking to see it now, but that motion's well worded. Can we see it recorded, please? Not now. But,
okay.
Yeah.
So if Councillor Van can send it to us. Okay. So on your participants panel, would you like to everybody who is in favour of that motion raise your hand on there, and we can see, guys, we don't have a poll. We can see then. A few minutes to do that. All those in favour? Okay. All those against? So take your hands down now, please, if you were in favour, and anybody who's against, put their hand up. So please make sure you take down your hands. If there's a few hands still raised there that were raised initially. Still a few, I think, were there. Councillor Abbott, Councillor Meader.
Madam Speaker.
Sorry, Madam Speaker was struggling.
Madam Speaker, I did vote in favour. However, my computer is a little bit slow to respond. So
that's okay. That's okay, Councillor Jackson. I'm just trying to get everybody to take them down so I can take a vote of against. Anybody against that motion, please could you raise your hand in the participants panel now? Okay, that's nobody. Any abstentions?
Madam Speaker, could I have it noted that I abstain because I don't believe that it specifically addresses the Wixham's point and it goes off about the national situation. So as it doesn't address specifically the concerns of Wixham's residents, I'm going to abstain on this motion. Thank you.
Okay. Right. Okay. Thank you,
Madam
Councillor Coombs.
Speaker, as a member of the Planning Committee, I would also like to abstain on this.
Okay. Councillor Weir, are you abstaining as well? Your hand's raised.
Yes.
Okay. So the motion is carried. We have some abstentions, nobody against. Okay. Thank you very much. We're going to move on now. The motion is carried. So that concludes item 7. And now we're going to move on to agenda item 8. Could you take down your hands if you've got your hands in the panel, please, because it's confusing me. Councillor McMurdo can't raise his hand. Okay, got that. Right, okay, so sorry, agenda item 8 is questions from members. Are there any questions from members this evening? Councillor Coombs, was that you raising your? Councillor Coombs.
Sorry, I'm trying to mute myself, raise my hand and wave at you at the same time, Madam Speaker. I'm not very good at multitasking. It's a question to the Mayor, Madam Speaker, about East West Rail. In 2020, when the East West Rail route was announced, I asked the Mayor if he would agree to meet and engage with residents and parish councils in the northern part of the borough that are most likely to be affected by the chosen route E, in order that he could address concerns that they'd expressed about the implications of the chosen route. It's my understanding that a number of parish councils from the affected part of the borough have now written to the Chancellor of the Exchequer listing a number of their concerns about the route. They're challenging the effectiveness of the public consultation and asking him to consider whether a different route offers more value for money. Can I ask the Mayor what actions he's taken to meet with concerned residents and parishes, to listen to their concerns about the chosen route, and how he's tried to address and mitigate those concerns?
Thank you very much, Councillor Coombs. I have actually met with a group of parishes. Myself and Councillor Headley, one of the officers, have met. We have been through that and gone through their concerns. Councillor Headley may wish to add something. Obviously, the consultation was not undertaken by us. It was undertaken by East West Rail Company, and I know that the officers have made sure that the parishes concerned have the details for the next round of consultation. Again, that this was a consultation that obviously happened much earlier on in this year. I have said Parish Council Chair that we're happy to meet again, and will do so. They've obviously written to the Chancellor of the Exchequer. I have no insight into his thinking on this issue at all. And obviously there was extensive work done on the economic benefit across all of the proposed corridors, because obviously a route has not been selected. It is a corridor, and in some places it's quite wide. And I know that the consultation on the exact route, I believe that East West Rail are doing that sometime next year. I don't know whether Councillor Headley has anything to add, because he's been on the consortium for the authorities that do that, and I wonder whether he's has got anything to add, if that's appropriate, Speaker.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I can come in, I mean, to be fair, I think the Mayor has covered the main points there. We have had a meeting, and we have undertaken to, continue talking with the parishes and the residents in those areas. Particularly, obviously, as the Mayor has mentioned, there'll be a consultation coming up in the new year, new calendar year, and we're obviously very interested in seeing what that the East West Rail Company will say in that consultation, and obviously listening to residents' views and submitting to that consultation. So yeah, I think we have met, and we'll obviously continue that conversation with residents and parish councils.
And if I can say, we are happy to meet them again, and said that at the meeting we had, and I thought that it was a very constructive meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Coombs, you've still got your hand raised. Are you wanting to come back on that?
I'll just do a quick supplement. I'll take my hand down, Madam Speaker. There we go. Just as a quick supplementary. In which case, could I ask you, Mr. Mayor, bearing in mind the discussion we've just had about consultations, and you're absolutely right, it's an East West Rail consultation, not a borough consultation. could I ask you to impress upon East West Rail the importance of a meaningful consultation? Clearly, I've previously expressed my support for the town centre route, believing it would be correct, but I'm also concerned that residents who are affected by that choice are not ignored, and I think it is important that concerns for people who are affected by the route are taken on board. So, will you give it your best endeavours to engage with East West Rail and make sure that they undertake a meaningful consultation with the residents in that part of the borough?
Yes, and I believe they did consult and write to all the parishes councils in their corridor consultation, as we did put out a press release, and I think I put some out personally on social media, I believe, but it's some time ago now, to remind people that this was happening. So I think we have done a lot to make sure people are aware of the consultation. Obviously, you can't force people to reply to consultations.
Indeed.
If I could come in as well on that point, I'm, as the Mayor said, I'm a member of the East West Rail Consortium, which is not the East West Rail Company. It's the sort of group of local authorities. And I've made the point there already that we need to make sure as a consortium that they pick up the lessons from the western section, which is obviously further advanced in this, and make sure we learn those lessons. And in response to the consultation, when it comes from the East West Rail Company, that the consortium as well takes into account the impact on residents. So I've made that comments already via the consortium that we're a member of.
Fantastic. Can I thank Councillor Headley and the Mayor, Madam Speaker? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coons. I have now Councillor Weir and Councillor Foley, but before you do, I'd just like to let people know that Councillor Moon has had to leave the meeting because he's not well. So just for everybody's information. So we'll go for Councillor Weir and then to Councillor Foley.
Sorry, Madam Speaker, I didn't take my hand down from the vote.
Oh, okay. Councillor Foley?
It was just in relation to the East West Rail matter.
Okay. Do you have a question?
No, I don't have a question.
Oh, okay. Any other questions? If you can't raise your hand in the box, can you wave or shout? Because I can't see everybody. No other questions? Okay, thank you very much. That then concludes agenda item 8, and we'll now move to agenda item 9. Agenda item 9 is a report of the Bedfordshire Fire and Rescue Authority. So can I invite Councillor Gambold as one of the Council's representatives on the Fire and Rescue Authority to present the report of the authority's meeting held on the 21st of October 2020 and move its receipt. The report starts on page 9, brackets 1 of the agenda. Councillor Gambold, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I was hoping you wouldn't give the full chapter and verse, that it was indeed the 21st of October meeting. But as your predecessor did, you tend to steal most of my thunder. The thing I would bring to your the thing I'd bring to your attention is the collaboration between the fire service and the ambulance service, which is working very well because it's taking a lot of pressure off the ambulance service, because the fire service can move some patients around and can provide additional drivers for the ambulance service. Other than that, happy to move it.
Okay, thank you. Is the motion seconded?
Seconded, Councillor Atkins.
Atkins. Are there any
Thank
questions?
you.
Are there any questions on the report? No hands raised. Anybody waving at me? No. Any comments on the report? No, can't see any comments. Councillor Gamble, would you like to sum up, please?
Nothing to add, Speaker.
Okay, thank you. So the motion is before Council, and as this is for receipt only, I'll assume that we're all in favour unless you indicate otherwise by either raising your hand or stating your name. So is it received by everybody? Is everyone in favour? Yeah, I can't see any shakes of heads, every nods of heads, so thank you, the motion is carried. That concludes agenda item 9, excuse my dog, and we move on to agenda item 11, as there's no business to conduct relating to agenda item 10. So agenda item 11 is the report of the Mayor and executive members. And I now invite the Mayor to present his report on the composition of the executive, starting on page 11 brackets 1 of the agenda. The report is for Council's information. Mr. Mayor, please.
I move the report, Speaker.
Thank you. Is the motion seconded? Councillor Royden, thank you.
Seconded.
Thank
Seconded.
you.
Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions on the report? No. Any comments on the report? Mr. Mayor, would you like to sum up?
Nothing further.
Okay, thank you. The report is received. So I now invite Councillor Atkins to give a presentation on next steps for reducing rough sleeping in Bedford Borough. Councillor Atkins, please.
Thank you. I have a PowerPoint presentation which is just about to appear on the screen.
Yep, got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So I'm going to start with talking about the rough sleeping in Bedford Borough and as it is at the minute, and then moving on to what our next steps are. The official rough sleeping count is taken in November each year, and we go over and above the requirement so that we get a really accurate number of people who are sleeping rough. So if you remember that in 2017, we had a very high number of 79, and that has been brought down year by year. And the official number has just been announced today for this year's 2020 count. And that figure is 8. Not 8, 6. And that is in addition to others that have been accommodated, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. Next slide. So just putting those into a graph just to show it clearer. Up until 2015, we counted the number of rough sleepers, but from 2016 onwards, we separated it and into UK nationals and non-UK. And you'll see that the green is the non-UK, which are people with no recourse to public funds. And this, in the last year, in 2019, there were 24 people with who were non-UK. And this year, which isn't showing on the graph, which is that there are 5 UK nationals and 1 non-UK. Next slide. So rough sleeping, it's the most common, it's the most visible form of homelessness. And there are many, many reasons why people become homeless and have to sleep rough. It could be many reasons such as family breakup. It could be problems within the family. It could be people losing their jobs and losing their accommodation, etc., etc. And some of the most complex needs are within the rough sleepers are the 4 that are listed there. So next slide. Many of you will be aware that the MHCLG, which is the government department, put the rough sleeping strategy as a priority, and that is the priority for all of us. And what we have done though in Bedford Borough is go above the speed that was hoped for, or which has been committed, and we have done a lot more, which I'm going to go on to, but the focus is on prevention, intervention and recovery. Next slide. So some of the things that we were doing, and these came in 2018, 2019, that there's a list there of how we were approaching the rough sleeping with a lot of different roles and organisations involved that were making a big, big difference. Next slide. One of them was the Somewhere Safe to Stay hub, which was in the town centre. It was opened in October 2019, and it was a 24-hour town centre accommodation with an assessment hub and the emergency overnight accommodation. It slept, there were accommodation for 17 people to sleep and 5 what's called sit-ups, which were people which would come in as an emergency, but know that they were somewhere safe to stay overnight. It also had laundry and shower facilities, but one of the biggest benefits of it was this daytime multi-agency services, which were all accommodated in the hub, and was able to put the to really help people who are rough sleeping, and to give them the advice and support and help them to find different accommodation, more temporary accommodation, and also work and health and a whole host of things. And it was doing really well and was featured on Anglia News and BBC. However, things began to change in March when COVID changed all that. So next slide. And we went into the first national lockdown, and the government quite rightly said that there should be no shared accommodation, and that that meant that the Somewhere Safe to Stay hub was closed, and the night shelter, which up till then had accommodated 18 people, that had to be reduced down to 6, making sure that nobody shared a room. But the biggest thing was that the rough sleepers were accommodated at the Mercure Hotel, and that was fantastic. It really has made a difference, and it was a combination of Bedford Borough Council and third sector partners working together, and that was done so quickly and secured the 60 rooms there. So, and one of the things is that we have kept that up. Unlike other councils, that is still there, and we're still providing that. So next slide, please. It has been a tremendous success, and we are going to be using that model as we move forward. So everybody has good quality accommodation, and it's individual self-contained rooms. There's people there 24 hours of the day, security at the hotel as well. The drug and alcohol triage clinics have been a real success, because they're there exactly where the people who need the help and advice are staying. So whether it's health with support, there's the support from the P2R, the drug and alcohol agencies, and also for mental health and substance dependency. And the other thing is that meals have been provided as well. So moving on. And this slide is just some of the agencies and organisations that are involved and are at the Mercure Hotel. Really successful. But there is more. And next slide, please. So there's the normal severe weather emergency protocol, which is known as SWEP. That normally comes in during the winter months, and people will know that in previous years it has been the accommodation provided by the council, paid for by the council, but Salvation Army have accommodated it. And that is usually where there are 3 consecutive nights of severe cold. We are making sure that that's it, if it's forecast, and it's for any person who, whatever their reason, is are having to sleep rough, and that is if they aren't in at the hotel. So there could be a number of reasons for that, and some of the people who have been in the count this year have been offered accommodation at the hotel but refuse it. So when I mentioned earlier that there are 6 people sleeping rough, some of those are sleeping rough by choice and not because they haven't been offered accommodation at the hotel. Or it might be that they have been at the hotel and have been banned for various reasons. And the other thing with this rep is that it would have an evening outreach worker, whereas currently there's the morning ones which go out very early, 5, 6 o'clock, to check and to help people who are sleeping rough. But those ones would have an evening one as well. So moving on. So up until now, 230 individuals have had accommodation at the McCure, and there are a lot of success stories here, because 111 of them have gone into settled accommodation. So that might be supported housing, it might be private rented accommodation. Some have returned to their family home, some have reconnected with their home country, and a variety of reasons. Some have, there's 41 currently still at the hotel, not the same ones, it changes. Some have had temporary accommodation, temporary solutions, and you can see the others there. There are 34 that we have lost contact with. They may have gone back to their families, we haven't heard that, or they have gone back to maybe their originating county, but we don't know where they've gone to, but they've not approached us again. Moving on. So the next steps, we have put in 3 very, very successful bids made to the government for the Next Steps accommodation programme, and I'm going to go through those three bids. Next. So the first one is the short-term funding, which is to continue the accommodation at the McCure until the 31st of March, and also to provide the security at the McCure. In addition to that, we have accommodation for five people with no recourse to public funds, and there's been a lot of work going on with people who have no recourse to public funds to get them to gain settled status where they can prove that they are entitled to be here. So in addition to that, there's also the specialist alcohol worker and, as I said, the settled status support worker. Next slide. The second bid is for accommodation, which we're hoping to run similar to the McCure, and it would be for 20 studio apartments, but with the facilities as well to have all of the organisations and agencies that are currently in the McCure working from there as well. It will be good in as much as that it will generate rental income, and there will be it will meet the ongoing costs. Next slide. And the third one is to continue giving support, but obviously we are hoping that over the 3 years that the number of rough sleepers will be reducing as well. Next slide. So I've spoken much about the rough sleeping, but rough sleeping is part of homelessness. And this is just, I've got a couple of slides just to show you about the temporary accommodation. And the red line on this slide shows the real difference this year that COVID has made as well about the need for temporary accommodation. Next slide. And this graph shows the difference between February this year and November. The green is February and the blue is November. And there is a lot more requirements for requests for temporary accommodation for single bedrooms, single people, which does not make life easy. Moving on. So helping with the temporary accommodation, part of the capital programme is to purchase 50 properties, and this is going to be beneficial for the council. It will reduce the cost compared to having to pay for short-term rentals, and gives the council a long-term asset. Importantly, it ensures really good quality accommodation, and also we have a lot more control over it. So far we have purchased 12 flats at St Cuthbert Street. All are in use. It would have gone on the private market, but we bought it and it is working really, really well. And we're also committed to buy 2 blocks of 14 flats each. We've got an option to buy a block of 6 flats, and also we have a bungalow which we are bringing back into use after a CPO. So that's really, really good news, and we will make sure that we are providing good quality temporary accommodation for the people who are in need. Next slide. And finally, I would like to thank all the officers and organisations who are working really, really hard to support the people who are homeless or sleeping rough. And there's tremendous effort and tremendous commitment that is being put into reducing rough sleeping. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Atkins. Do you move the presentation?
I certainly do.
Super, thank you. Is it seconded?
Seconded.
Thank you. Dave. So now, do we have any questions on presentation? Councillor Coombs.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Councillor Atkins. That was a really interesting presentation, and I scribbled some questions down as you were speaking, and then you answered them during the course of the presentation, which is, you know, what do we do going forward? And it does look as though the borough's got quite a robust, albeit it's quite a high price tag attached to it, but it's an important issue. I think my question for you is, presumably the objective of all these bids is at some point when COVID is over that you are going to decant the people who are currently in the Mercure, obviously assuming that more permanent solutions haven't already been found, into these new properties that you're talking about. Is that the case? Because presumably the Mercure will need to get back to sort of a regular state of affairs at some point. And secondly, what does eliminating rough sleeping look like? Because as we all know, there's always a small hard core of people that either choose themselves to sleep rough, or you mentioned the problem where some people have been banned. So however much hard we try, there's always going to be a really small hard core. What is your yardstick for eliminating rough sleeping completely in terms of numbers? And I do think it's a very worthy objective, and I know that the government has said the same thing about eliminating rough sleeping as well. So you know, it's good that everybody's on the same page on this. But what does eliminating rough sleeping look like? Because this year's figures have, although you showed the numbers dropped to 6, the fact that everybody is in temporary accommodation because of COVID has sort of distorted things slightly. So yeah, if you could just let me know. Thank you.
Okay, the first answer then, you asked about what will happen to the people in the Mercure. That's the whole purpose of our second bid, which is getting what at the moment is a vacant office building and converting it to 20 apartments, but also having the same facilities that the Mercure have, of having all the different organisations and help on hand. So that's our move forward, and that is why, excuse me, that's why we are keeping people at the Mercure until that becomes available, because it's got to be completed, and secondly, we've got to have the conversion take place. So the second part of your question, obviously the answer would be nil, but it's doubtful if it would ever be completely nil, because some people really do choose to sleep rough. Some people who are sleeping rough at the moment have their own accommodation, so it's not always what it quite appears. And also one of the things to remember is that people who are begging are not necessarily rough sleepers, and rough sleepers are not necessarily beggars. So Does that answer your question?
It does, and I just thought of a third one, if you'll indulge me, Madam Speaker, which is obviously the COVID has had a big. We're concerned about domestic violence during the period of lockdown and people being stuck at home, and I just wondered, is there a strategy in there that's taking account of the potential? We hope not, obviously, but we have to be realistic. Potential for accommodation being required as a result of people having to being forced to leave their homes through unbearable domestic situations.
The council has a duty to help people who are genuinely homeless, and there's a whole load of criteria for it and ways that we can deal with it, but that would go through our housing and through temporary accommodation. The last thing we want is for somebody in a situation like that to become homeless and rough sleeping. So yeah, there's a homelessness is a very big area to cover.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bywater. See you. Are you there?
Apologies. Thank you, Councillor Atkins for that really good summary. I know it's a huge subject, and I'm glad, obviously, that people have been safely off the streets during this, and obviously we want them to be safely housed long term. If they're in temporary accommodation, they're still homelessness, aren't they, technically? So what kind of sort of long-term solutions have we got to getting people safely housed and supporting them towards that? I know that's quite a big question, isn't it?
Yeah, that is one of the reasons why we need so much temporary accommodation, but a lot of work goes on with our housing department to help people to find their own accommodation, whether that is private or some other way. And there's also the council's list, so that they can be on the register and bid for properties if they are eligible to. So a lot of work goes on, and yeah, it is an increasing problem at the moment, and as the graph showed, that during COVID there is more and more need for the temporary accommodation, but we are doing all we can to help people get settled, because that's what we all want.
Thank you. Any more questions? Oh, Councillor Foley, just put your hand up. Is this a question?
Yes, I really appreciate the work the council is doing for homeless people, and it's been good to see the dramatic reduction in rough sleeping. And yeah, I very much support the council's efforts to make efficient use of its resources by providing its own temporary accommodation. I'm aware in doing that the council has a policy of making sure that blocks aren't in too close proximity to each other. I was wondering if Councillor Atkins had any view about what too close proximity might mean in terms of metres.
And I think I know what you're referring to. And if you check with what you may be referring to, that isn't a temporary accommodation building, but the criteria would be is that they tend to be well, the ones that we've currently got are, we've got the one in St Cuthbert's, and we are in the process of obtaining the other one nearby. They're in different streets, and the other thing is that temporary accommodation doesn't necessarily mean a problem. No, as I said, the ones at St Cuthbert is working extremely well. We're providing really good accommodation, and the others that we are looking at will similarly be providing probably family accommodation, that they 2-3 bedroom, and I think even one might be 4 bedroom. So it's certainly not the type of of premises that would be high on our concern list, and also people who are in temporary accommodation aren't necessarily people who would be causing any difficulties. So I hope that answers your question.
You've still got your hand raised.
Yeah, it doesn't answer. It seems to me perfectly reasonable to ask if there's a distance of not having two properties too close to each other, to ask, well, how close is too close? And I'm not getting any answer.
Oh, at the moment, the two that we are purchasing or have purchased, they are within about a quarter of a mile of each other.
If I may, Speaker, Councillor Atkins, Councillor Foley, it really depends. If it's two individual dwellings, then they could be next door to each other. So it depends on the size of them and the nature. So I think it's not a straight meterage issue. It's about the size of the dwellings. And as you say, two individual properties next door to each other, I consider wouldn't be too close. It really has a number of factors, and therefore I can understand. I can't give you a meterage, and I don't think Councillor Atkins could either.
Okay, thank you. So we've got no more hands raised, nobody waving. So can we move on to comments? Any comments, please? No. Somebody's come off mute. Oh, Councillor Nawaz, you have a comment?
Yes, Madam Speaker, thank you. I really appreciate the Bedford Borough officers and Mayor himself, and especially Councillor Colin Atkins. Everybody's doing a great job, especially in this difficult times we're going through. And I think it's a very tough task to handle this homeless situation as it is very, very difficult, and especially in this climate we are going through. So well done to everybody. I really think we are doing a great job on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nawaz. Okay, the hands raised. So, Councillor Atkins, would you like to sum up, please?
I would just like to say that I'm really pleased that we are doing, or officers and other organisations are doing such a good job in helping and supporting our rough sleepers and people who are homeless. And then therefore I move the report.
Thank you. So the motion is before Council. As this presentation is for information only, I'll assume that we're all in favour again, unless you indicate otherwise to me. So are we all in favour? Can you nod and shake heads and thumbs up? Thank you. Perfect. So the motion is carried. That concludes agenda item 11. Now we'll move on to agenda item 12. This is reports of the executive. So I'll now ask Councillor Headley to present the executive report, starting with the capital programme update, starting on page 12.1 brackets 1 of the agenda. Councillor Headley, please.
Thank you. This is an update to the Council's capital programme. We keep the programme under regular review and bring it to full Council for approval. In this review, there are a number of schemes where the profile of spend has changed, and that's set out in the report. The report updates a number of schemes, including adding an extra year to the programmes in the rolling programme. Again, these are set out in detail in the report. There's one new scheme included, and that is additional school capacity. We're recognising that in the years 22-23 and 23-24, an additional £10 million is allocated to create additional school capacity that we needed to reflect the population growth in the borough. I move the recommendations as set out in the report.
Thank you. Is the motion seconded?
Seconded.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So are there any questions on the report? See any hands raised? Nobody waving. Are there any comments on the report?
Move it, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Headley, would you like to sum up, please?
Nothing to add, thank you.
Okay, so the motion is before Council. This time we do have a poll which has been set up to enable you to vote either for or against the motion or to abstain. So you've got 1 minute to cast your vote, and we've got nobody dialing in. So the poll should be popping up for you now. on your screen. So would you like to vote now, please?
I can't see the question, Chair. Oh, I can see the question, Chair.
Got it?
Apologies. Yeah, I've got it now.
Good. Let's wait until the poll is closed, till everyone's had a chance to vote. Okay, the poll has ended. We don't have anybody calling in, so could we have the result, please? Post. Oh, here we go. So we have 37 in favour. The vote is carried. Thank you very much. So now, can I now invite Councillor Headley to introduce the second executive report on the revenue budget trends 2020?
Madam Speaker, sorry to interrupt you. On that poll, it gives 37 out of 51. And clearly there are only 40 councillors plus the mayor. Whilst I'm sure it hasn't happened, but it looks like that poll has been offered to people who are not members of the council. And I just...
No, it hasn't. The poll is only open to panelists, and that is the 41 councillors. The results are showing all people who are present at the meeting, but only 41 have been allowed to vote.
That's fine. It's just because it says 51 on the poll. That's all.
Email circulated.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but yeah, it's actually out of 41. So okay. Is that okay, everybody else? So, where were we? So, the second executive report on the revenue budget trends 2020 to 2021 on page 12.2 brackets 1 of the agenda, and to move the recommendation. This was circulated on the 27th of November 2020. Councillor Headley, please.
Thank you. So this report sets out the current budget forecasts for the year. As you'll see, with sustained work from officers right across the council, we've been able to work largely within the available funding, including the additional grants for this year, and forecasting a relatively limited overspend. I want to thank council officers for the way they've served local residents during this very challenging period, whilst continuing to manage expenditure, and also for the strong leadership of the mayor and portfolio holders throughout this time that's led us to this position that we're presenting today. Clearly, this is a forecast at 30th of September, and there's a lot of the year remaining. And again, a lot of uncertainty still as to how the rest of the year will unfold. It's important to always remember that there's a forecast element in this report. As you'll have heard me say before, we also have to recognise that there is reduced income from council tax for this year, and that will impact on next year's budget. And this is largely the impact of more residents rightly claiming the council tax reduction scheme support that they're entitled to. Now, this report asks full council to agree to the transfer of a further £2 million from adult services to children's services, and this reflects where the pressures are in the current year. In considering this, it should be noted that an additional £4.2 million was added to the adult services budget this year. So this change reflects a lower growth rather than a year-on-year reduction. Also, the COVID-19 related costs for adult services are currently forecast at £1.5 million, and they're not included in these figures. They're included elsewhere under the COVID-19 category. So I move the recommendation as set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Is it seconded?
Seconded.
Thank you. Or do we have any questions on the report? No. Any comments on the report? Councillor Headley, would you like to sum up?
Nothing to add, thank you.
Thank you. So the motion is before council. Again, a poll has been set up to enable you to vote either for or against the motion or to abstain. And you've got 1 minute to cast your vote. So again, the poll should pop up.
Speaker.
Yes, Councillor Wotton.
The last few times it has not been able to vote. So I'm not deliberately abstaining, but just it's a technical thing. I just can't seem to vote. So add my apologies.
Okay, thank you. Poll has ended. Can we have the result, please? Okay, so the motion is carried, 38-4. Thank you very much. That concludes item 12. And I'd like to just go back now to agenda item 11. I've missed off, nobody shouted at me, did they? But I've missed off the report of the Mayor on the composition of the executive. So can we just go back to
You didn't, Speaker. I actually proposed it. You said 11.1. It's starting on page 11.1. It ended on page 11.1 as well.
Oh, okay.
And it was a very brief item. And this interruption has been longer than the item.
Okay, that's fine then. I'll carry on then to agenda item 13. I couldn't remember voting on that, so I thought I'd better go back to it. Okay, right, now then, back to agenda item 13, report of the General Purposes Committee. So I now invite Councillor McHugh, this is what reminded me and made me think I hadn't done it, was to present the report of the General Purposes Committee relating to the Planning Committee scheme of delegation, which was circulated on the 1st of December 2020, and to move the recommendation as set out. Councillor McHugh, please.
Thank you. Yeah, this reference from the General Purposes Committee, it brings forward the new scheme of delegation for planning and guidance for members. And you will know that since the start of the pandemic, planning has operated under a temporary scheme of delegation that was primarily introduced to reduce the workload for officers who are often in suboptimal conditions without the ability to open up lots and lots of bits of paper planning or have multiple screens or great internet. So I do want to thank all members for their forbearance during that time. It was entirely the right thing to do to consider the workload of officers and what could reasonably be delegated. Although councillors never lost the ability to call applications in their ward in one way or the other, just leaders or the chair. It always was the case that this would be a temporary scheme of delegation, and so it's good to be able to present to the council the new scheme of delegation and guidance for members, which also takes on board the feedback from the LGA review. And this was passed with all party support at planning and general purposes. So, and I'd just like to thank the officers and members for collaborating to agree this new scheme. So I would ask you all to support the recommendation.
Thank you. Is the motion seconded?
I second the motion.
Thank you. So do we have any questions on the report? I have Councillor Foley's hand up already. Is that for the question, Councillor Foley? No? Okay. Do we have any questions then on the report?
I do, Speaker, Councillor McMurdo.
Oh, yeah. Okay, Councillor McMurdo.
I want to seek clarity. It's on page 5 of the report, soft copy, page 77.8. I don't want to assume what it is, but it says view of how the DM team work. Is that well, yeah, is that development management? What does DM stand for? I can't find it.
Yes, development management. Yeah.
Thank you.
Is that okay, Councillor McMurdo? That was your question? Yeah. Councillor,
Yeah, thank you.
Could you take your hand down, please, if you're not asking a question? Do I have any other questions? Do I have any other questions? Okay, are there any comments on the report? Councillor Foley? Yes, you have got a comment. Okay.
Thank you, Speaker. Yeah, from what I've managed to read and understand this report, I agree with it entirely. My problem is that we received it less than 24 hours ago, and there are detailed aspects in there that I just have not had time to get my head around. And this gets to its most extreme when it comes to the delegations to the Director of Environment and Chief Officer Regulatory Services when it comes to powers to stop up footpaths and bridleways under assorted bits of the Highways Act, which there's just no way I was going to have a chance to look up in time. I find it very, very odd that we're being asked to approve this as a council when we've had so little time to pay attention to what it is we're being asked to approve.
Well, it went to GP. Was that last week? So in terms of the report from GP that set the timescale, it's a reference from GP. It came to GP from planning. So it's been available since I think the 13th of November for the planning committee. The planning committee discussed it, they unanimously agreed it, and then it was available a week before the general purposes committee. So it has been available for a long, long time, and this is simply a reference from the general purposes. That's why the reference has come late. Well, it's come according to when the last general purposes meeting was.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McHugh. Councillor McMurdo, you've got your hand raised. Do you have a comment?
Yes, thank you, Speaker. I just want to make comments around, and I'm pleased that you've not taken on a number of the recommendations, but I'm referring to 5.6 in the report, in the Planning Advisory Service. So that's an LGA grouping. I mean, some of the stuff they're saying, particularly in point 2, the further training to all members to make it clear that decisions genuinely defendable. And then it goes on to say at the second paragraph, of poor record on appeals in respect of member outcomes, using applications, and it goes on. But then I'm slightly surprised that they go so far as to say a decision should be made by this is at point 6 on page 5 of the report. Decision should be made by the chair at the pre-committee briefing as to whether a formal site visit will be arranged. And then at point 8, this one completely, this is the Local Government Association, actually saying an informal open afternoon or early evening would enable members, particularly those new to committee. And some of the language I just thought was, not conducive to the democracy that we live in. And I am pleased that you've not taken a lot of those recommendations forward. But I will go back to the LGA personally on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McMurdo. Councillor Van.
I did just want to comment, thanking Councillor McMurdo for that comment, because I wholeheartedly agree with you. And I think as a local authority, we remain with unworn public questions at the start of meetings, as best as we can in this COVID situation, and with the right to speak protected, and rejecting that kind of proposal to reduce the amount of time for members of the public to speak as well. I completely agree with you. The defence of the democratic aspect is absolutely necessary, and that's why not all of those recommendations have come forward. I can utterly agree with you. Those bullets in the report are as presented to us, because it would have been wrong to have edited them and sort of effectively hidden bits of the report. But I just want to endorse what you say, essentially. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other comments? No, can't see any hands raised. Councillor McHugh, would you like to sum up, please?
I've nothing to add. I don't know whether Councillor Abbott wants to say anything.
Abbott?
No, I have nothing to add on that either. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the motion is before council. Another poll has been set up for you to vote either for or against. or to abstain, and you've got 1 more minute to cast your vote. Apologies for those who can't manage to vote. Councillor Wootton. The poll has ended. Could we have the result, please? Okay, so the motion is carried. Thank you. Can we now move on to agenda item 16, which is a notice of motion submitted by Councillor Bywater. So I call upon Councillor Bywater to introduce the motion of which notice was duly given.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Before I introduce the motion, which you have in front of you, can I just bring your attention to the three very small alterations I've made in the bullet points at the bottom. If you can just cast your eye to the final paragraph, well, the penultimate paragraph. So I wanted to change when it says in Bedford for implementation, I'd like to add to begin during the 2021 to indicate or just to clarify that I don't expect this to be completed. This is not a short-term sort of project. Then taken to the first bullet point, just very briefly, I've added food champions, plural, just to indicate that there were concerns about work for officers, which I do understand, and we don't want it to fall on a single person's shoulders. And also it will be more than officers, it will be wider groups and indeed members, I would hope. Likewise, the second bullet point, I've also made it plural, organisations, plural, because it seemed that there were multiple partnership organisations that could bring something really, really, really valuable to this. So if I can just give you just a little bit of context to the motion. Obviously, during the pandemic, a whole host of charities and community volunteers, along with the council's hardworking community hub, so far have gone above and beyond, I think we'd all agree, locally, both to help alleviate temporary food poverty and to practically help get food to vulnerable people who were self-isolating and shielding. And I would like to thank each group and individual who've organised to make sure the most in need were supported with food and indeed for other help like medicines or in ways that helped people emotionally. A lot of really amazing stuff was done. And of course, real gratitude to the work by council staff who we know have been under great pressure in unprecedented times. For future resilience, though, I think there's a real danger of over-reliance on charity, not least charity and the third sector, volunteers, whatever, not least because people volunteering have much less free time now than they did during the first lockdown. That was extraordinary times when so many people were furloughed and not able to go to work. Those times are not the same now. So this is one reason, this fear about us relying on charity in the third sector, this is one reason for taking the opportunity to create a food strategy now to make it particularly necessary. So I think there are a couple of opportunities to address much wider issues around access to healthy food for everyone. It's most urgent because some of the biggest indicators of child poverty now are obesity and tooth decay. Tooth decay is actually the most common reason for children being admitted to hospital. According to this year's The Broken Plate report from the Food Foundation, unhealthy foods are 3 times cheaper than healthy foods. But we know also that there are many other factors involved. It's not just about price. And these factors cut across the public and the commercial sphere, and also in terms of the council across departments. So I'm thinking about health, education, planning and licensing. This is not just about health portfolio. So if you'll allow me just to whiz through the motion, it's not very long, is it? I'll skip the first line because I've already said that about the pandemic context. So access to high quality, affordable, nutritious food should be a right of all Bedford residents, but it's not currently the case. For example, 15.1% of people in Bedford Borough are living in the most deprived 20% of areas of England by indices of deprivation. About 15% of children live in poverty. In Bedford, 20.2% of children in Year 6 are classified as obese, slightly higher than the average for England and markedly higher for the East of England. The food strategy is a document that identifies actions to help enhance our current food system and prepare for the future. So key elements include healthy eating, environmental sustainability, food security, economic and community growth, and social justice. More specific topics within the food strategy may include growing, rearing or foraging for food, processing food, reducing food waste, preparing food for consumption for households and the food service industry, eating food, and composting. So by creating a collaborative food strategy, as over 50 other councils have done, Bedford will become a town with a more vibrant food culture, renowned for quality, sustainable food, offering a rich variety of local produce available to everyone. Bedford will become a town where a wide range of local food businesses achieve high standards of sustainability, generate employment, and contribute to economic prosperity. The Council resolves to request the Executive to create a food strategy to address the causes of food inequality in Bedford for implementation to begin during the 2021-2022 municipal year. In order for this to happen, the Executive will seek to identify food champions within the Council to lead the project, identify partnership organisations, apply for funding to develop the strategy, action plans and projects, create a network of food partnerships, food partnership organisations, and consult residents to contribute to the creation of a food action plan. Prioritise those with least access to healthy food, encourage the production of food locally, and support the sale of such produce. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I have Councillor Headley with a hand raised, but first of all, do I have a seconder for that motion?
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Weir. Okay, Councillor Headley.
Yeah, so it's not a question, it's a need move an amendment to the motion. Just give notice I wish to do that.
Okay.
I'd like to second that, Councillor McHugh.
Thank you, Councillor McHugh.
Do you want, can I take? Do you want me to take that now to
yes,
move
please.
my motion? Thank
yeah.
you. Yes. So thank you for the motion. This motion highlights an important area of concern for us. As can be seen by the activities and initiatives that are already in place. Whilst we should never be complacent, I think it's important to start from where we are and the excellent work that has already been done. I'll start where this motion starts on income. You'll know that we are in the minority of councils that still have a 100% council tax reduction scheme. Compared with a council that might have, say, a 20%, and some are higher than that might have a 20% minimum payment, that for a band D is £378 per year. Now that's money that's in the pockets of those most in need in Bedford Borough, money to help families pay their bills and put food on the table. We've also actively promoted in recent months the uptake of free school meals. We want families to get the support that they're entitled to. And on this, I can tell you tonight that the Mayor's earlier commitment to support families with food costs over Christmas school holidays is well advanced. Shopping vouchers will be available for families entitled to income-related free school meals over the holiday. And please look out for more information on that and details in the coming days. As many people will know, we have strong relationships with third sector organisations like FACES, Project 229, Food Bank, YMCA, and the Early Childhood Partnership. And this is continuing with an even stronger relationship pulling together to deliver winter support for local residents to ensure that no family goes hungry. And of course, there's a lot of work done through public health on healthy eating and nutrition, particularly with families and children. And it's also worth mentioning that the council continues to encourage home composting with the provision of subsidised compost bins. And as you will know, allotments are also provided by the council, all helping to support homegrown food. During the height of the pandemic, with the support of volunteers, the council's community hub delivered thousands of food parcels to people who are the most vulnerable. However, it's fair to say that these initiatives have not been drawn together into one plan, so I welcome the opportunity for the Executive to do that, will also help to ensure that the streams of work are reviewed and renewed, as well as, we never want to settle for just standing still on behalf of local residents. So my amendment just seeks to tidy up the part of the motion directed to the executive to ensure we get the best outcome from this that reflects the cross-directorate and cross-portfolio nature of this work and builds on the work that's already in place. So I want to move the amendment that's previously been circulated. I don't know, Speaker, if you'd like me to read that out or whether people of content have seen it.
I think everybody should have seen that. It came out this afternoon, didn't it? So yes, I don't think you need to read it out. Thank you, Councillor Headley. Councillor McHugh's reserved her right to speak. So now we're going to discuss the amendment. You can only speak once on the amendment, please just note that, unless you want to raise a point of order. And Councillor Bywater, you will not be able to speak on the amendment, but you have a right of reply before we vote on it. Okay, so do we have any questions, first of all, on the amendment? Councillor Foley had his hand up and down. Councillor Martin Moran.
Hello, thank you. Yes, I just wanted to ask about the role of education. I think one thing that if you are used to planning balanced meals, if you know how to cook, it's very easy to take it just for granted that others can do that. But without educating children and parents about nutrition, about actually just physically how to cook, healthy eating becomes not really a choice because they can't choose to do what they can't do. And I just wondered if Councillor Headley could just tell us about how education comes into this motion, because I think that's actually something that's really important. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. I mean, clearly there's different elements of that. It's education, obviously, through our schools and education services, but I believe also the work that public health do with families is very important as well. So what I'll do is undertake to make sure that that's one of the things we pick up as we take this through the executive. So I think you're quite right to highlight this, and we'll make sure this is a thing we pick up as we take it through the executive. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson.
Mine is actually a comment, but if I could just further answer Councillor Martin Moran-Bryant's question, because I agree with you on the point that you make in relation to education, and public health have done work on this, and there's a lot of work that happens in schools now, and I know that there's work across public health and children's services to implement that, but we have in the past, and admittedly not quite as recently as I would like, but then COVID has presented all sorts of problems, been put together cookery lessons for families, particularly vulnerable families. And I think it's something we need to try again. And I'm happy to take that away and do more of that. It's something I'm really passionate about, because those skills are so important. If you can't chop an onion, if you don't know how to do that, how can you prepare a meal that requires you to do that? So these skills are so important. There was very limited uptake. It was very, very good at first, but that kind of trailed off and people didn't come along as much as we would have liked. But in an ideal world, had our incredibly hardworking public health team not been diverted into this, dealing with this pandemic, I'm sure we'd have done more recently. But I completely agree with you. It has such an important role.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Could you hold on your comment until we've just made sure no more questions? Councillor McMurdo too has got a comment. Councillor Zamir, do you want a question or a comment?
I got comment as well, so I can wait.
Okay, lovely. Right, well, we'll go through are there any other questions? I've still got a lot of hands raised, but I assume Councillor Weir, is yours a question?
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker.
Okay, we'll go
it's for Councillor Headley. The amendment to the motion obviously was prepared before this meeting, and given that Councillor Bywater's changed some of the impact of that motion, for instance, the implementation starts in 21-22 rather than, as it would appear in the motion that we have before us, that it would be completed in year 21-22. Does that make any difference to your amendment, and have you considered that before you've presented it?
Yes, definitely considered the changes that were made. And obviously, I recognise that, or I suspect that those changes were made in response to our amendment, but clearly, the move of the original motion hasn't gone as far as we've gone in clarifying things. So I think our amendment still makes things much clearer in terms of the information being asked and being presented to the executive, and recognising the work that's already going on. And I think it's important to recognise the work that always goes on, because what we're going to do is build on that. We're not starting from scratch, having never considered this. I think it's important to recognise a lot of work in this area is already happening, and we're asking the executive to pull that together into one strategy and build further on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I have quite a lot of hands raised, which I assume now are all comments. Anybody got any more questions? If you want to sort of wave a little bit. No, nobody doing that. So now we're going to move on to comments then. So we've got Councillors Samir, Jackson, McMurdo and Foley at the moment. So we'll go through them in order. Councillor Samir.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you very much, Councillor Lucy Bywater, for bringing this motion forward. During this pandemic, in wards like Kingbrooks, Colwell and Queen's Park, where social deprivation is high and also child poverty is high, charity organizations have been doing tremendous work to provide the support and help to vulnerable families, as well as run programs which encourage children to have a healthy lifestyle. These wards also have high concentration of BAME communities. We are all aware that BAME communities are being disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. During the first lockdown, like many, I volunteered for community help and as well as other local volunteer groups and charities. These local volunteer groups and charity provide help and support and food for sale to the BAME communities. Worryingly, we noticed the dietary need of BAME community were initially not being met. We should support to all local volunteer groups and charities to support our communities and provide the expertise where it may be required to meet the need of specific communities. Please support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Foley.
Sorry, it takes a moment to unmute. Yes, I'm concerned about this amendment in that it removes a fair amount of the detail from the motion, and then thus leaves us in danger of having the situation where we have something that is so wishy-washy as to be almost meaningless. Certainly it's important to recognise the hard work that the public health team has put in the past, and to recognise that the fact that they're not able to put as much work into this issue at the moment is by no means any of their fault at all. They are clearly doing excellent work on another field at the moment. And they will need a degree of rest after the current coronavirus situation as well. But there are particular details within the motion as presented which would be deleted by the amendment, which we need to retain. For example, saying about the idea of applying for funding to help develop the strategy, and particularly the wording about prioritising those with least access to healthy food, not just generally tackling food inequality.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Foley. Councillor McMurdo.
Well, I'm about to demonstrate we don't have a whip in the independent group. Yeah, I really do. I value this coming forward, having been personally involved in some of the stresses, even in the wards that are not in the deprivation that has just been spoken about. So I actually think the motion is great to be brought forward, because not having a food strategy in today's climate, I think, is probably an oversight. And think it's great to be bringing it forward. I regret you see the amendment is wishy-washy. I think that was the words that were used. I would hope that nothing in our council discussions is wishy-washy, notwithstanding some might sometimes see it that way. So yeah, the acknowledgement of the food strategy, that's clear in the amendment, so that gives it some focus and strength. And you know, if I might just say that you know, deleting some of the bullet points in the original motion therefore lacks commitment. I don't accept that. I regret, because one of the things that has been said and isn't in the original motion, but is making an application for funding or seeking ways and areas that we might find funding for taking this very serious matter. Because if I go to I know we're not discussing Speaker, I know we're not discussing the substantive motion. You know, it clearly says in order for this to happen, the executive will seek to, and it says identify a food champion within the council to lead the project, identify a lead partnership organisation. Well, that second one's actually not in our gift to actually allocate that, but we could look to identify. So I think it does. It's not often I speak to agree in these what often are, you know, a political debate across the chamber. But I do think, and I think it's right to tighten it up, endorse the importance, and of course a good strategy that will come as a policy document to full council. So there will be a voyage in the discussion of it coming through. So my personal view is that the amendment actually supports the food strategy more robustly through the amendment than it does in the substantive motion. So that's my position, and it really does come back to the point around the resources that the council has in its reach.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McMurdo. Councillor Sultan.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm sorry, I've got a bit of a slow internet connection tonight.
That's fine.
So I'll try my best. So, what's for tea is often heard evening phrase shouted out by children in households up and down the length and breadth of this country. So thank you to Councillor Bywater for bringing this very important motion before full council. As this motion highlights that in some households, it's not a matter of what, but if there's anything for tea. It's heartbreaking to think of people, especially children, going hungry in the UK. And we should be determined to do everything we can to support those who are most vulnerable in our communities we serve. As Councillor Zamir highlighted, local food charities are often a lifeline for those who rely on their help to feed their families, and demand for the services has seen a huge increase since the pandemic started. And an important role was played by Bedford Borough Community Hub to support the various volunteers and groups, as well as direct support to the most vulnerable in our communities. In the absence of a national strategy on food poverty by this government, implementing a food poverty action plan, we send out a powerful message that hunger is unacceptable and we are serious about addressing it. So I support this motion with the amendments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sultan. Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just to address the point that Councillor Foley made, I can assure you that you will have my complete commitment to the delivery of a food strategy. It's something, as I mentioned earlier, I'm incredibly passionate about. I think it's so important. I mean, I love cooking. I enjoy growing my own food, and I'm really sorry, Councillor Bywater, that I didn't get any plants to you over the spring, because I intended to, and that didn't happen. But it's really, really important to me that this happened. So it's really good to see it laid out in this way. And I have to say, I do support the amendments, and the points that Councillor McMurdo has made are really important here too, because there is that journey through full council, and where we can all work together. Because I think actually, hearing all of these comments, we're all in agreement that this needs to happen, and that we need to have a plan that we can all contribute to. So I'm very keen to see this happen. I'm very keen to do all of the things. I mean, you highlighted some really, really key areas of work for public health here. For example, the healthy weight, obesity is a huge issue, and childhood obesity is something that public health do a tremendous amount of work on, and we want to continue with that. And access to quality food is a big part of addressing that. And upskilling people, as Councillor Moran Bryant said, to be able to cook their own food is so important too. I think we can do more to help people to grow their own food as well, and that's something that maybe that we can talk more about. And I think we also need to do more to tackle tooth decay in children, which is very often linked to diet, which I mean, it's terrible actually, children ending up in hospital because of tooth decay. It's so traumatic for them and for their parents too. So I do support the amendment, but I am wholly supportive of the principles that have been set out here today, and I think we're all in agreement, and it's nice to end full council with us all in agreement like this on something that's so very important. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. I don't have any more hands raised, so I'm going to come back to you, Councillor Headley. Would you like to reply to all the comments on sum up your amendment? And then I'll come to you, Councillor Bywater, for the right of reply.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for the comments been made. I mean, I just really want to say that it's my belief that the amendment strengthens and gives better clarity to the motion, and gives increased clarity to the executive in taking this matter forward. It's important that we draw together this as with cross-cutting across the council, cross-cutting themes, and not sort of limit it to a number of champions, even if it's more than one. I think that I think the cross-cutting nature through a comprehensive document is the better way to go. Also, to pick up one of the bullet points that is being amended, I don't think we want to wait to apply for funding, which is sort of implied in the original motion. It may be not what's intended, but certainly that's implied. We are, as I've already demonstrated, we are already doing a lot of actions that address these issues, and we're not going to wait to get funding for some sort of separate project. This is integral to the work of the council, and what we need to do is draw those themes together into one clear strategy. It's not waiting to do something until we get some funding to take that forward. I mean, clearly that's not to say we're against trying to get external funding wherever possible, because clearly we'll do that, but we're not going to wait for that to happen. So I mean, I take the comment really from Councillor McMurdo to say that it's more substantially supports the food strategy, the amendment, and that's what I think we're trying to do with that amendment, and ensure that we can take this food strategy properly forward, building on what's already happening, and for the benefit of local residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Headley. Councillor Bywater, would you like to, as the mover of the original motion, would you like the right of reply to the amendment?
Thank you. Yes, so some good news there about food vouchers. Thank you, Councillor Headley. That's really good to hear. And I just want to reiterate, I do really recognise the good work that's been done. I absolutely value the work of officers and public health. I think we are all so grateful to them across the board for the work they've done. I've had a good meeting recently with public health officer who's working on obesity, who's doing fantastic work. But at the end of the day, we are facing food poverty for a lot of our families, and that is in Castle Ward as well. Castle Ward, a large section of Castle Ward comes in the most deprived wards of the country. So I'm a school governor, and when I speak to parents and when I speak to teachers especially, not so much the parents because they're not likely to admit it, but the teachers are seeing children who are hungry, who cannot concentrate, who are malnourished, who have tooth decay. There are many complex reasons for this, we know, but this is something we are seeing, and this is something that's not really going to go away. The reason I've raised it now is because of pressures of the pandemic and the way it's thrown these issues up. But these issues have been with us for a while, and good work's been done, but they are still here and they will continue, which is why we need ambition. The government is committed to halving obesity, for example, just one of the issues, by 2030, and that's a pretty tall order. It was mentioned the desire to help people prepare and grow food. I agree, those are really, really important life skills. They're not they shouldn't be middle class luxuries. They should be something that everyone's able to do to empower them and to give them that future resilience. I just throw in, as an example of a partnership, we could be working with Cranfield University. They ran a project this summer that a lot of Bedford residents took part in called Lockdown Lettuce. And it was a project to get people growing just modestly in their back garden or their window box, and then to carefully monitor the well-being, their mental health, their physical health, even the way it changed their shopping and their lifestyles. So it's, sort of partnerships like that, I think, could be really valuable. Just moving on to the amendments. So prioritizing those most in need. The amendment removes the word prioritise in favour of focus. For me, that's not saying enough ambition. I'm not saying there's not ambition, but it's not saying to me that there is that commitment to ambition. It's removing the consulting residents, which I think is important because it's got to be about a two-way street. What are people lacking? What do they need? What skills do they need? How can we deliver those to them? Or what kind of partnerships could we work with? Identifying food champions, that's an important thing. To take that out, you need someone to help, not necessarily lead it, but you need that linchpin there to make sure it carries on driving forward. You've taken out encouraging local food growing and sale. These could be really important for the local economy with multiple benefits. And applying for funding, it was not my intention to imply that we wait. Obviously, work's already been done. Public Health are already working on this, but this applying for funding would enable us to go for more ambitious projects of a sort of more specific, with specific targets. So I think that the overall word I would say is, I feel that the wording of the amendments, the change in the wording takes away some of my detail, and it takes away some of the commitment, and I think it's watering it down as far as I'm concerned. I think the watchword for me is resilience and ambition, and the amendments to me don't say that. We don't want this hardship to continue, and at the end of the day, we could be having further food shocks in the future for increasing pandemics and from the effects of climate change, which will push up food prices and cause potential food shortages, and also Brexit, which could create uncertainty about supply lines and food. So we really need this resilience. I think this is a really good time to have this. It's about food, it's about hunger, so we really need ambition. And also, just to add, Councillor McMurdo may be interested to know that in Scotland, out of interest, every local authority, I think since 2015, has to have a food strategy. And interestingly, their food strategies, I don't know if they have to, but they seem to focus very much on growing food, because that's a really important aspect of food and also our culture. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So we're now going to vote on the amendments. We have a poll again for you set up to enable you to vote for, against, or to abstain. That should pop up in a minute. The vote on the amendment, this is. So you can see there the amendment. We're voting for the amendment. Please vote now.
As I got troubles, could I support the amendment, Councillor Headley's amendment, please?
You can. Thank you, Councillor Wootton. Oh, little baby. Councillor Van.
Madam Speaker.
Yep. Councillor,
Sorry.
what's that?
Yes, that is. I'm having the same issue. So yes, I would also like to
support
with Councillor Headley.
Okay, thank you. The poll has now ended. Could we see the result, please? Okay. Noting that we have 2 further for, the amendment is carried. So now that this amendment now becomes the main motion, takes the place of the original motion. Do we have any further comments on the amended motion, which is now the substantive? I've got some hands up, but I don't know whether I've got Councillor Sultan and Jackson. Have they just not come down, or do you have further comments?
No, sorry, Madam Speaker, I need to take my hand down.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, there's no further comments. So now we're going.
Madam Speaker, if I may.
Oh, sorry, Councillor McMurdo.
Yeah, I just want to build on, and not because I'm Scottish. I mean, my home is Bedfordshire, and indeed the borough of Bedford. But there are some good examples, and so let's reach out and see where they are and build on them. And it will be a voyage of consultation, because we are required to consult on strategy. So it's not at the expense of not going through some of the procedural stuff. And I do want to thank Councillor Bywater, as I'm sure many would, for bringing this forward, because more today than ever, it is important. And a lot of the points Councillor Bywater brings forward are very, very reasonable. And I would like to hope we can consider this going forward. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you. Okay, we now just need to finally vote on the amendment that is now the substantive. We don't have another poll on that. So I just need you all to, if maybe if you could all raise your hands to say for, just physically, and then if I can flick through, yeah. Any against? No, any abstentions? Oh, Councillor Hendricks. Any abstentions? No. So that motion is carried. Thank you all very much for that.
Madam Speaker, could you just announce the result? Because I think the people watching on YouTube, they don't see the poll. And so I think you need to announce it.
Okay. So the result of the poll on the amendment, which is the poll that we had the numbers for, was 33 for, 4 against and 1 abstention. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I didn't realise that wasn't visible. Okay, so that concludes agenda item 16. And as there are no other items of council business, I declare the meeting closed. I'd just like to wish you all a happy Christmas. Hope you all manage to meet up with family over Christmas and have a lovely and safe time.
Same to you, Madam.
Thank
you, Speaker.
Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you. Good night.